My grandfather's lawyer announced I'd inherited everything. My brother's face darkened as 50 years of being the good son earned him nothing. The conference room fell silent as Attorney Wilson cleared his throat and continued reading the will. I couldn't process what was happening. Hayes Joseph had left me his house, his investments, even his prized classic car collection. My brother Michael, who had lived with him for the past decade claiming to care for him daily, received only a small cash sum and some personal items. This must be a mistake, Michael finally said, his voice dangerously quiet. I took care of him. I was there every day. She barely visited twice a year. I wanted to defend myself, but shock kept me silent. It was true I hadn't visited as often since moving across the country for my teaching job, but we spoke weekly. Hess had always encouraged my independence, telling me to chase my dreams rather than worry about him. Mom placed her hand on Michael's arm, her expression a mixture of concern and disappointment. Joseph must have been confused near the end. We all know who was really there for him. Attorney Wilson adjusted his glasses. I assure you, Mr. Lawson was of sound mind when he signed this will 6 months ago. He was quite explicit about his wishes. Explicit about being manipulated, you mean? Michael snapped, glaring at me. What did you say to him, Rachel? What lies did you tell when I wasn't around? I didn't. I started, but he cut me off. You always were his favorite for no good reason. I rearranged my entire life to care for him while you were off finding yourself, and this is what I get, Aunt Patricia? Always the peacemaker tried to intervene. Perhaps we should all take some time to process before tea. Here is nothing to process, Michael stood up, toppling his chair. She somehow convinced a dying old man to cut out the person who actually sacrificed for him. I won't forget this, Rachel. As he stormed out, my cousins and other relatives looked at me with a mixture of shock and accusation. Mom followed Michael without even glancing my way. I sat alone at the table as the room emptied, the weight of unexpected wealth eclipsed by the heavier burden of my family's judgment. Attorney Wilson placed a hand on my shoulder. Your grandfather anticipated this reaction, he said quietly. He left you a letter as well. Perhaps it will provide some answers. I took the sealed envelope with trembling hands, wondering what could possibly explain why Hafs had made me the unlikely heir to everything he had spent his life building, paired, and why he had chosen to tear our family apart in the process. The letter remained unopened in my purse for 3 days after the will reading. I couldn't bring myself to read Heiss's words while his funeral arrangements were still underway, especially with Michael barely speaking to me and Mom taking his side at every turn. You need to make this right, Rachel, Mom said as we finalized the funeral arrangements. We stood in the hallway of the funeral home, her voice low but intense. Your brother devoted his life to your grandfather. You can still fix this by doing the right thing. And what's that exactly? I asked, exhaustion making my voice sharper than intended. Sign over the house at least. It's been Michael's home for years anyway. I hesitated. I need to understand Hesso's reasoning first. This wasn't just about the house, Mom. She shook her head, disappointment evident. You always were stubborn just like Joseph. After the funeral, I returned to Heiss's house, parent now my house parent, and finally opened his letter in the solitude of his study. His handwriting was shaky but determined. By my dearest Rachel, *sen. By now you know I've left you the bulk of my estate, which has likely caused quite the uproar. I've never been one to explain my decisions to others, but you deserve to know why. This isn't about favorites or measuring love by inheritance. It's about truth. *sen. Look in the bottom drawer of my desk. The blue ledger contains information you'll need. Your brother isn't who he pretends to be. I've known for some time, but I wanted proof before acting. You always had the courage to face difficult truths, Bart. You'll need it now. *son. All my love. *son. Grandpa. My hands shook as I found the blue ledger. Inside were meticulous records of household expenses, medical bills, and withdrawals from Hesso's accounts over the past 3 years. Many entries were highlighted or annotated with question marks. Several large withdrawals coincided with dates. Michael had claimed Hestos needed specialized medical equipment, equipment I couldn't see anywhere in the house. I was still processing this when the front door slammed. Michael stood in the doorway of the study, eyes narrowing at the ledger in my hands, going through his things already, bursting what to sell first. His voice was bitter, slurred slightly. The smell of whiskey hung in the air. Michael, we need to talk about these accounts, I said carefully, closing the ledger. What I need is for you to get out of my house. He stepped closer, pointing his finger inches from my face. This was my home long before you swooped in to claim your prize. This isn't about the inheritance, I tried to explain. There are discrepancies in Hale's finances that save it. You have no idea what caring for him was like. Every expense, every minute of every day devoted to his needs. And now you come in judging me? His face was flushed with anger. You are pathetic. Ways where his precious little genius couldn't do anything wrong. Never had to work for anything when I didn't respond. He laughed harshly. You know what? Keep the damn house. I've already cleared out what matters to me as playing lady of the manor while the rest of the family remembers who really cared. After he left, I discovered Hesso's antique watch collection was missing, along with several valuable paintings and silver pieces. A quick check of the garage confirmed my suspicion. Cares the 1967 Corvette Hessos had lovingly restored was gone too. I called Attorney Wilson, who confirmed what I feared. When I mentioned the financial discrepancies, his long pause told me Iso's hints about my brother might be just the tip of the iceberg. The days after the funeral blurred together as I took leave from my teaching job to sort through Heiss's affairs. Each drawer I opened, each file I reviewed revealed more questions than answers. The blue ledger had been just the beginning. I found bank statements showing regular large withdrawals in the years since Michael had moved in, purred money that couldn't be accounted for by medical expenses or household needs. More disturbing were the caregiving logs Hats had apparently kept hidden in the hollowed-out book, detailed notes of times Michael was absent when he claimed to be providing care. Your grandfather was more aware than people realized, said Maria, the visiting nurse who came twice weekly. I'd asked her to meet me for coffee, hoping for insights. He may have seemed frail, but his mind was sharp. He noticed everything. Did he ever mention concerns about his care? I asked carefully. Maria hesitated, loyalty to patient confidentiality warring with something else in her expression. I can't speak to specifics, but I will say your grandfather often seemed neglected when I arrived on Mondays, unchanged bedding, medications occasionally missed. My stomach nodded. Michael was supposed to be here full time. Mr. Lawson asked me not to make waves, she admitted, but he did increase my visits from once to twice weekly last year. Back at the house, I found Hesse's appointment book and cross-referenced it with Michael's caregiving schedule. The patterns were damning. Parent on days Michael claimed to be taking Hessos to specialists. There were no corresponding medical appointments. Instead, credit card statements showed charges at high-end restaurants and luxury goods stores hours away. The doorbell interrupted my investigation. It was Mom, looking tired and drawn. You haven't been answering my calls, she said, not waiting for an invitation before entering. Michael is devastated. The family is talking, Rachel. Nobody understands why you won't make this right. I took a deep breath, Mom, here's something you need to see. I showed her the ledger, the caregiving logs, the cross-referenced appointments. She glanced at them dismissively. Record-keeping errors. Your grandfather was confused. Maria confirmed he was often left alone. And what about these withdrawals? Over $200,000 in the past year alone with nothing to show for it. Mom's expression hardened, but something flickered in her eyes, pattern recognition, not surprise. Exhibition deserves compensation for caregiving. It's grueling work. Compensation? Yes. Theft? No. I studied her face. You knew, didn't you? Her silence was answer enough. Why would you cover for him? I asked, disbelief coloring my voice. He's my son, she said simply, and the money helped us both. Your brother has been supporting me since the divorce, the monthly checks, the renovations to my condo. Where do you think that came from? The revelation hit like a physical blow. Not just Michael, but my own mother had been benefiting from stealing from us. I thought I struggled to find words. I thought he was doing well with his consulting business. Mom laughed a hollow sound. The business that never quite materialized. Michael hasn't had a real job in 3 years. Looking after your grandfather was convenient for both of us, and you are okay with that. With taking advantage of Heseth when he needed actual care. We did care for him, she said defensively, and he owed us. All those years your father and I struggled while Joseph lived comfortably. All those opportunities he gave you that Michael never got. Something cold settled in my chest. What opportunities? Mom seemed to realize she'd said too much. Nothing, Priggett. What opportunities, Mom? I insisted. She sighed. Your college fund, your down payment on your first apartment. You think that came from your father and me? We could barely make rent. It was all Joseph, playing favorites as usual. I sat down stunned. He souls had funded my education, my first home. He'd never said a word, letting me believe it was my parents' sacrifice that had made it possible, as Mom left with a final plea to be reasonable about the inheritance. I found myself wondering how many more secrets this house held burnt, and how much deeper family betrayal could possibly cut. A week after discovering my mother's complicity, I still hadn't processed the full scope of the deception. I'd spent days organizing Hase's papers, creating a clear timeline of Michael's financial exploitation and neglect. The evidence was overwhelming, but I hesitated to take legal action. Despite everything, they were still my family. I called Michael, suggesting we meet on neutral ground, parent, a coffee shop downtown where we'd spent time as teenagers. To my surprise, he agreed. He arrived looking more put together than at the funeral, though the dark circles under his eyes suggested he wasn't sleeping well. Thank you for meeting me, I began. Let's skip the pleasantries, he cut in. What do you want? I placed a folder on the table. I've been going through Hase's records. I know about the missing money, Michael. I know about the times you weren't there when you said you were. His expression didn't change, and I'm trying to understand. This isn't like you, Perder, at least not the brother I thought I knew. He laughed humorlessly. The brother you thought you knew hasn't existed for a long time. You've been gone, Rachel, living your perfect little life while I dealt with the reality of watching our grandfather deteriorate. That doesn't justify stealing from him. Is it stealing when you were taking what should have been yours anyway? He leaned forward. Do you know how many opportunities I missed because I was busy being the good son? Job offers I turned down, relationships that fell apart because I was always on call. That was your choice, I said quietly. Was it? Or was it the role I was assigned? The dependable one, the one who stayed behind while you got to leave with everyone's blessing? I thought about what Mom had revealed, Michael. I didn't know. I had helped with my education. I always thought that your hard work was all it took. He scoffed. Must be nice living in that fantasy world. The truth is, everything came easier to you. I was drowning in student loans while you sailed through debt-free. I was stuck in dead-end jobs while Hase's made calls to help you land your first teaching position. His bitterness was palpable, but it didn't explain everything. Even if that's true, it doesn't justify what you did. The neglect, Michael. The times you left him alone when he needed care. Something shifted in his eyes, parned the first flash of what might have been shame. I never meant for it to go that far. At first, it was just borrowing money for investments that would pay off later. Then Mom needed help and things snowballed. I saw an opening. We can still fix this. I'm willing to split the inheritance more equitably. We could set up a trust, figure out a fair division for a moment. Hope flickered across his face, but then hardened into suspicion. What's the catch? No catch, but I need honesty moving forward. And some of what was taken needs to be returned, especially Hess's personal items. He stood abruptly. So you can play the magnanimous sister, the savior, tell everyone how generous you were to your thieving brother. He shook his head. Keep your charity, I'll get what's mine another way. What does that mean? It means I've already spoken to a liar. Hess wasn't competent when he changed his will. We'll prove it in court if necessary, Michael, please. I reached for his arm. This isn't what Hessos would have wanted. We'll never know what he really wanted, will we? Because someone made sure his final wishes benefited them. His parting words lingered as he walked away. Hope you are ready for a fight, little sister. The family's already chosen sides that evening. My phone buzzed with text messages from cousins and aunts I'd been close to my entire life, all variations on the same theme. How could you do this to your brother? The family unity I'd always taken for granted was fracturing, with most rallying behind Michael's version of events. Only Aunt Patricia called directly. Here is more to this story than Michael's letting on, she said cryptically. Your grandfather kept a journal in his bedside table. You might want to find it before anyone else does. Aunt Patricia's tip led me to Sace's bedroom, which I'd been avoiding since returning to the house. His presence lingered there most strongly. Port the faint scent of his aftershave, reading glasses still perched on the nightstand, slippers tucked neatly beneath the bed. It felt like trespassing on private grief. The journal wasn't hidden, simply tucked between library books in his bedside drawer. A plain brown mother notebook worn at the edges from handling. Implied daily entries spanned the past 2 years in Esso's increasingly shaky handwriting. The early entries were mundane paired weather observations, notes about birds visiting the feeder outside his window, brief mentions of Michael coming and going, but about 6 months in the tone changed. Asterisk the 12th of February, asterisk sen. Michael left again this morning. Said he'd be back by dinner, but it's now past midnight. Caller his cell twice, pent straight to voicemail third time this week. Had to ask Mrs. Keller next door to help me to bed, embarrassing at my age. Lurt tell Michael Pernty gets so defensive lately. Asterisk the 4th of March, asterisk sen found prescription bottles empty again. Impertype Michael 3 days ago I needed refills. Lumpsy he forgot paying quite bad today without medication. Something's not right with him. Wound empty liquor bottles in garage recycling. Is he drinking again? Asterisk the 17th of April, asterisk sen Rachel called today. Such a joy to hear her voice. Michael walked in during our conversation. Became agitated when I mentioned she might visit this summer. After I hung up, he suggested I was becoming confused about who really cares for me. Said Rachel only calls out of obligation. Not true. I may be old, but I know genuine affection when I hear it. Asterisk as the entries continued, Hestos documented growing concerns. Mrs. missing jewelry, unexplained bank withdrawals, days left alone despite Michael's claims to hospice staff that he provided round the clock care. Most disturbing were the manipulative tactics. Michael frequently told Jesus that I had cancelled planned visits or was too busy to call, when I had done neither. Asterisk, the 30th of September, asterisk, send made decision today, meeting with Wilson tomorrow to change will. Michael found bank statements I had requested. Very angry confrontation, accused me of not trusting him. When I mentioned discrepancies, he suggested my memory is failing, threatened to have me evaluated for dementia if I continue making accusations. I know what I know, spoke with Maria privately. Parter, she's been documenting neglect too. Rachel must know the truth, though it will break her heart about her brother. Asterisk, the final entries revealed Jesus had suspected mom's involvement as well, noting conversations overheard between her and Michael about money. His last entry, dated just 3 weeks before his death, was heartbreaking in its clarity. The hardest part isn't the betrayal by Michael Part. I've watched him struggle with his demons for years. It's Helen's complicity that truly wounds me, my own daughter-in-law, choosing to look the other way while her son takes advantage of my declining health. I've tried to be generous to both, but it's never enough. Only Rachel has never asked for anything. She'll need strength for what's coming. I hope she can forgive me for placing this burden on her shoulders. Asterisk, I closed the journal, tears streaming down my face, not just for Jesus' suffering, but for the devastating confirmation that both my brother and mother had been gaslighting him, making him question his own mind while systematically taking advantage of his deteriorating condition. My phone buzzed with a text from Michael, family meeting tomorrow at Mom's. Be there at 2 p.m. if you want to discuss settlement before this gets uglier. I clutched the journal tighter. The meeting would happen, but not on their terms. It was time for the full truth to come to light, no matter how painful the fallout would be. I arrived at Mom's condo 15 minutes early, journal and financial records in hand. To my surprise, the living room was already full. Parent Michael and Mom, of course, but also Aunt Patricia, Uncle Dave, and 3 cousins. Michael's expression was triumphant as I entered, clearly believing the family gathering was a show of unified support for his side. Rachel, Mom gestured to the only empty chair positioned directly across from everyone else. The setup wasn't subtle, parroting me against them. We've been discussing a reasonable resolution to this unfortunate situation. Have you? I remained standing. And what does that look like? Michael leaned forward. We're prepared to keep this out of court if you agree to a more equitable distribution. The house, and at least half of the financial assets, should come to me, as Heiss's primary caregiver. Several relatives nodded in agreement. Uncle Dave added, it's only fair, Rachel, your brother sacrificed years of his life, did he? I opened the leather journal. Before we discuss any resolution, I think everyone should hear Heiso's own words about the kind of care he received. Michael's face paled. What is that, Grandpa's journal? He documented everything, Michael. The days you left him alone, the missed medications, the unexplained withdrawals from his accounts. I turned to the family. Did any of you know Heichos was often without his pain medication because Michael forgot to refill prescriptions, or that he had to ask neighbors for help getting to bed when Michael disappeared for days? This is ridiculous. Michael stood up. He was confused, imagining things was Maria, his nurse, confused too, I countered. She documented the same neglect. And what about these? I spread bank statements across the coffee table. Over $300,000 withdrawn in the past 3 years. Where did it go, Michael? Not to Hayes' care. The room fell silent as relatives leaned forward to see the evidence. Aunt Patricia picked up a statement, frowning at the highlighted withdrawals. And Mom, I continued, my voice breaking slightly, he knew you were involved too. He overheard your conversations about using his money. Mom's face flushed. That's not true. Here is his journal entry from last Christmas. When you both thought he was napping, I read aloud Hayes' detailed account of overhearing them discussing using his funds for Mom's condo renovation. Uncle Dave looked between Michael and Mom, confusion evident. Helen, is this accurate? You don't understand. Mom's voice trembled. We took care of him. If we occasionally used some money for ourselves, it was compensation for what? I interrupted. For the care he wasn't receiving, for making him feel like he was losing his mind when he questioned missing items, for lying to him about me. Michael lunged forward, trying to grab the journal. This proves nothing. He was bitter and vindictive at the end. Cousin Sarah, who had been silent until now, spoke up. I visited last Thanksgiving, Michael. You told me you couldn't leave for dinner because Hayes needed constant supervision, but when I arrived early, you weren't there. Jesus was alone, still in his pajamas at 4 p.m., without his medications for the day. He made me promise not to say anything. One by one, other relatives shared similar observations they dismissed or kept quiet about. The united front Michael had counted on crumbled as the full picture emerged. This is why Hayes changed his will, I concluded quietly. Not to hurt you, Michael, but because he knew you couldn't be trusted with his legacy. He didn't want to expose you to the family, but he couldn't let the deception continue. Michael grabbed his jacket, eyes wild. You've always been so perfect, haven't you? A Phoenician's favorite, never doing anything wrong? Well, enjoy your inheritance and your moral high ground. I am done with all of you, he stormed out, slamming the door. Mom sat frozen, the weight of exposed lies visible in her posture. The family gathering that was meant to pressure me into submission had instead revealed truths too painful to ignore. Aunt Patricia moved to sit beside me. Joseph knew what he was doing when he left everything to you, she said softly. The question now is, what will you do with it? I looked around at my shattered family, the trust between us fractured, perhaps beyond repair. I don't know yet, but whatever happens, it will honor who Steez really was, part not who anyone pretended he was. 1 year after Hess's death, I stood in the garden of what had once been his home, part now transformed into the Joseph Lawson Community Center for Seniors. The sprawling property that had been the source of so much family conflict now served as a day facility offering companionship, medical supervision, and activities for elderly residents who needed support, but weren't ready for full-time care. The renovation had consumed much of the inheritance, but watching seniors enjoying the gardens Hayes had lovingly tended brought a peace I hadn't felt since before his death. The center also housed a small museum displaying his classic car collection, with proceeds from admissions funding services for seniors who couldn't afford care, part addressing directly the neglect he had experienced. It's beautiful, said Aunt Patricia, joining me on the garden bench. Joseph would be proud. I hope so, I smiled. Sometimes I still feel like I failed him by not seeing what was happening sooner. We all failed him, she acknowledged. But you've created something meaningful from a painful situation. That's all any of us can do. The legal battle with Michael had ended 6 months earlier with a settlement far smaller than he'd initially demanded. His challenge to the will faltered once Ass's journal and Maria's documentation became part of the court record. In the end, he received the smallest cottage on the property and a modest monthly stipend, permanent conditional on his participation in financial counseling and addiction treatment. We rarely spoke, and when we did, conversations were strained. The brother I had grown up with seemed permanently suddenly replaced by someone hardened by resentment and the consequences of his own actions. In his more honest moments, he admitted the gambling addiction that had driven much of his financial desperation, but true accountability still seemed beyond his grasp. Mom's path had been more complicated. After months of defending Michael and minimizing her role, the family's collective distance finally broke through her denial. Her tearful apology during last Thanksgiving had seemed genuine, but rebuilding trust would take more than words. Your mother's asking about getting coffee next week, Aunt Patricia mentioned casually. She's been volunteering here twice a month. Decides it helps her feel closer to Joseph. I nodded, non-committal. Part of me wanted to embrace any sign of change, while another part remained wary of being manipulated again. Maybe. We'll see. As the afternoon cooled into evening, the last visitors departed and Stack began closing up. I walked through the quiet halls, touching the familiar banister, and his head climbed daily in his final years. His presence still lingered in the corners of this place, though transformed now into something larger than just family memory. My phone buzzed with a text from Mom. You've done something remarkable. When you are ready to talk, I am here. No pressure. Love you always. Asterisk. I didn't respond immediately. The road to forgiveness would be long, with no guarantee of full reconciliation. Some wounds might never completely heal, but standing in the space that had once been the epicenter of betrayal and was now a place of community and care, I felt Hez's wisdom guiding me still. Real family part wasn't just about blood or inheritance or obligation. It was about honesty, respect, and genuine care, even when difficult truths needed to be faced. Hez had known that all along his final gift wasn't the property or money, but the chance to rebuild on a foundation of truth rather than comfortable lies. As twilight settled over the garden, I finally texted back. Yokesh, talking no promises, one day at a time. Asterisk. Some bridges could never be fully repaired, but perhaps new and different connections might still be possible. Not perfect, not without scars, but authentic in a way our family hadn't been for too long. In the end, that might be the most valuable inheritance of all.